And welcome back to Reality with Reality Hub. Today's guest is Jacqui Beaver, a transformational coach specializing in coaching, mentoring, leadership training, and workshop facilitation. She facilitates human-centered career and life design workshops, mainly focused on supporting those in midlife and career transition.
Yeah, I was so looking forward to this episode because I knew that Jacqui would bring her genuine insight and have so much wisdom and authenticity to share, and boy, did she deliver.
Yeah, it was a great episode. Jacqui came from a very heart-centered place, and if that's something that you vibe with, as we do, you can get in touch with Jacqui on LinkedIn, which we'll also put in our show notes.
Hey, Jacqui, how's it going? You made it.
Yeah,
You're
I
here.
did. It's going really good.
I'm so excited about this episode.
I can see you're beaming.
I'm beaming.
This
I'm
is
so
what
looking
happens
forward to this.
when we have old friends in the studio.
Yeah, I know. That's crazy.
Old. Hey, be
Crazy.
careful how you use the word old.
Yeah,
You don't look a day over 92, honestly.
Thanks. That's cat and dog ears you're talking.
Sure, yeah.
So yeah, Jacqui, this is crazy how you came to being here, right?
Yeah.
Because we crossed paths. Well, we knew each other
Yep.
back in the late 90s.
Yeah, probably
Those
would have
days,
been.
right?
Yeah, not 80s. It would have been 90s.
It would have been
We'll go
90s.
there,
I
yeah.
think it's the 90s. Yeah,
Yeah.
and then you came back into our orbit,
Yep.
so to speak, because of Reality Hub and listening, and then got in contact with us.
Yeah.
And then we caught up over coffee and had amazing chats
Yep.
about stuff, vibing, and here we are.
Well, it better be a good show because the number of times I've mentioned, and you know Jacqui Beaver's coming.
It's actually Jacqueline Beaver. Yeah, we're quite posh.
Jacqueline Beaver.
Yeah, it's my
She's
stage
going to
name.
be on the show. She better say good things. So
Yeah, no
appreciate
pressure.
I know,
Jacqui.
sorry,
Yeah.
we've kind of hyped it up a bit.
Yeah.
That's all good.
Can we say? Well, do you mind, Jack, saying a little bit about yourself? You know what you do.
Yeah, okay. So what I do, I'm, as what futurists would call, in terms of my work, embracing the gig economy.
Ooh,
So that
The
means
what?
the gig as in
The
the
gig.
gig economy.
the-
Oh, the
the
like
gig,
gig.
like a gigabyte.
Yes,
that
of
you
course,
do.
I get it. I
Yeah.
thought like gigabyte.
That means you
kind of
travel
stuff.
and do things by laptop.
that.
Yep,
It means I do lots of different things.
of course.
Yeah.
Means I can flex with what I do. Predominantly, the work I do is around supporting people through midlife transition. So if you go to my LinkedIn profile, it will say I'm a human-centered career and life design coach. I coach, I mentor coaches, I facilitate workshops, I do leadership development, and then I've got a bit of a rolling plan about how to play a little bigger around some of that stuff.
Nice.
Yeah.
So tell us a bit more about those workshops.
When I was looking at how to completely switch up my career, I think sometimes the work that we do to help people is based around kind of what we go through. And so what became really prevalent to me is that a lot of people will move through life and career pretty much unintentionally, and that there's some boring traditional programmed tools out there to help people.
Yeah, we can relate.
Yeah.
So can relate. Yeah, totally.
And some really traditional thinking around it, as well as some of the societal programming around where you should be in career and life.
Yeah.
And so I started getting curious around a bit of stuff. And one of the things I got curious around was, you know how, I think you've talked about it before, Rob,
Yeah.
how books and people cross your paths when they
Sure.
need to cross your path.
Yeah.
So I came across some work from these two guys, professors at Stanford, and they founded the Stanford Life Design Lab. And so they take a really different slant on supporting people through career changes,
Yeah.
using design thinking and methodologies and playing around with alternate futures and, quite out of the box stuff.
Life by design, right?
That's
So
what
you're
I've
in the
got- that's-
driver's seat.
Yep,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
So that's what I've...
Alternate futures.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
It means that, so if we think about the life design process, and for people who work in corporate, you might be familiar with design-led thinking as a process. It's used to create things that you have no idea how they're going to end up, which kind of life is the perfect example of that. And you go through a bunch of different exercises, starting with being really clear on where you are in the current moment, around what your view on life and work is. And you end up ideating which is a fancy word for just getting really creative about stuff, 3 alternate futures. So when I went up to San Fran and did the training with the guys, there's, I think, 3 people in New Zealand who are accredited in the program. They joke around about the guys up at Slack, scientists, knowing that we're talking about parallel universes out there, right?
Yeah.
Is Slack a institute?
It's something where the scientists play that they talk about. I'm not familiar with the exact detail,
Those guys up at Slack.
Is this a code word name for something?
Yep,
Yeah.
quantum physics kind of place.
Now I want to know about the guys up at Slack.
No.
Yeah. But anyway, so they joke about the guys up at Slack. So what happens?
So they teach us part of the program. If you have, we all have different futures in us, we can live, right? But we get quite myopic about what our future path is.
Mm-hmm.
But we get stuck in a rut.
Yeah, totally. And there's people out there living the futures we want to live. But if you could actually live 3 different lives,
wow,
what would they look like?
Yeah. I mean, how many people actually do that? Actually stop and just take a moment and go, hey, what other life could I create? And what other life could I create? And how would that feel? And how would that be? And what would I be doing on a day-to-day? Yeah. So allowing your, we talk about imagineering or...
I love that phrase. My dad used to say that to me when I was younger.
Yeah, that's exactly what ideation is.
Sit here imagineering what to do.
And tapping into your creative self and going, wow, and don't put any limits on it.
Yeah.
Don't go, oh, well, I can't do that. Just go, no, free flow, and just get it out there. And then,
totally.
That sounds amazing. Love that.
So at the end of the process, the beginning of the process is being really clear around what your view on life is. So big picture, existential stuff,
limiting beliefs, your
everything,
your internal programming, etc., etc.
Yep. So what do you believe life to be about? And you end up with a 250 paragraph around what that looks like. Then you do a view of what work is. So what does work mean to you and why do you work? And then you look at those 2 things and just see what you notice. So a lot of people don't do that. I was very unintentional about my career, but a lot of people get to their midlife point and they haven't checked back in from when they were at high school around what's important to them in life and what's important to them in work. When do people do that?
Since Mr. Smith, the career guidance advisor, told you that, being a writer was never really a good idea, Rob.
Yeah. And the thing is, you do get stuck on a particular path or track, right? Yeah. Without questioning it and without veering off unless something happens, like some sort of crisis. But you kept talking to me about how in your life, in all your roles, you found like you were like a square peg in a round hole.
Yeah, totally.
Right? So you had to adapt.
Yeah.
And kind of go, well, what's my mission and purpose in this role? I must find some sort of happiness or meaning to it, even though it wasn't necessarily aligned with my truth and what I really wanted to be and do. So,
Yeah, and I think that's what's important to me about this process is it helps people step through that with some really good tools and some really creative thinking. And for me, absolutely, I always felt like a square peg in a round hole. And that's just the phrase I use to go... I knew what my superpowers were even back when I was at Les Mills, right? We talked about that. So I knew what they were, but I don't think I ever valued them. So how that played out was people would see in me what I didn't see in myself. So there's a whole bunch of ahas I've had over the last 4 years.
It's fascinating because everyone in your life can have a different version of you.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And so my version was very different. But because I wasn't intentional about what I was doing, and I didn't see the stuff in me that other people saw, people would say to me, hey, you'd be great at that. You should go and do that. So I'd go and do it. Then someone else would go, you'd be great at that. You should go and do that. Yeah. And so that's how my whole 29-year career evolved. And there would be pockets within where they pointed that I could go, oh, yeah, I can really do this. Like
little signs, road signs,
necessarily
if you like.
Negative experiences. In a lot of ways they were positive, but you were literally being pushed from pillar to post in a positive way because you didn't have the realization of what you should be doing necessarily because other people would see it in you. It's like a parent, a mother or a father going, look, I know my son. He'd be really good at XYZ. And this is what people were doing to you.
Yeah, completely. And I think what ended up happening, or what I've had lots of reflections, especially over the last 4 years, because it didn't work out for me so well in the end, is that I was using my superpower to deliver on everyone else's dream. without having a really clear line of sight
Yeah.
to how I could use it
Well, do you mind?
Yeah.
at its full maximum to help
Yeah.
and serve other people.
Do you mind unpacking what your superpower is in relation to what Rob and I talked about in a recent episode of knowing your superpowers?
Yeah.
Rob, would you mind kicking off with what it is to know your superpower, and then you could elaborate on
Yeah.
what yours is?
Yeah. Well, I thank you for talking about all that stuff. I totally get where you're coming from. Yeah, I mean, superpower, my definition is discovering your truth and your unique abilities, and then, as you say, doing it for your and for other people, but you're aligned to it and you're totally there. And it requires knowing yourself. It requires being vulnerable, and as you say, believing that those things that make you truly uniquely who you are valuable and can can inspire you and inspire other people. So it's not this, it's developing a sense of who you really are and what you really want to do in life without having the excuses, right?
So at the core of it, it's knowing yourself.
I think so. The core, yeah. And I mean, that's just my sort of interpretation of it.
Yeah,
I want to try. I don't want it to be something really woo-woo and out there, and like you've got to be so talented. You've got to be an amazing singer or an amazing this or dancer or something. That's your gift and talent, and you're going to be successful no matter what. I believe everyone has some untapped or has this limitless potential as long as you start tapping into it and you start aligning to what you really want to do and stop listening to the voices of what you should be doing. I think it comes back down to limitations. It comes back down to getting on the right track. And
I think a flip side to that is when you know yourself, you know when things are presented to you, what you want to say yes to and what you want to say no to.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we just say yes to everything, but when you really know yourself, you can be really comfortable with, no, that one's not for me. That's where I'm going.
Let me give you an example. I was listening to a podcast with Aubrey Marcus, and Humble the Poet was on it.
Right.
He had this amazing analogy that his grandmother used to tell him when he was a kid. And his grandmother would say, was like a quote, an upturned bucket can't catch the rain, right? And that's an analogy for life. I have a similar one where if you don't have an open heart, you can't let in all the good stuff. But the thing is, when you turn the bucket upside down, you're now vulnerable and open to the bad stuff, okay? But if you don't open yourself up, how can you open yourself up to the magic and to all the possibilities? But realize it's a two-way street. And what people do, and Brené Brown mentions this as well, that people put on this armor. They want to protect themselves. They don't want to be open. They don't want to show their truth because it's safer, right, than sticking your neck out and going against what everyone else is thinking or feeling what you should do.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So, Jacqui, what's your superpower?
Yeah. That was another one of my big ha-has. And I guess looping, I will get to my superpower, but I guess looping back to what you said, Steve, around when you know what your superpower is, it becomes a lot easier to say yes or no to things. And I agree. For me, one of my big ahas is I knew what my superpower was. I just didn't have the belief in it.
You're playing hide and seek with the universe,
totally.
as you said to me.
Yeah. So I knew what it was.
That's a great saying. Did you come up with that? I was playing hide and seek with the
Yeah,
universe.
totally.
Yeah. I love it.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's another interesting story.
Can I just add something to that? The reason why I said when you know yourself, it makes it easier to know what to say no to. I guess it's a different sort of scenario because we're talking about when a person knows themselves and things are presented versus a person who is playing hide and seek with themselves and is still trying to figure out what they're going to identify as this is me.
Yeah.
In the acting world, the great acting teachers and mentors say it's not what you say yes to that defines you. It's what you're willing to say no to in terms of carving out a career. And I personally resonate with that because I think it has such simplicity that I can identify with it. Although I'm sure you'll unpack on a greater level, but that's an interesting one.
No, I totally agree with that. I think what you say no to completely defines you, and especially in your career.
Yeah.
I guess some examples of, and to my superpower, if I explain the examples of where I'd find the pockets to use it, it'll
Please.
be easier to kind of speak to it, because sometimes I think when you talk about the stuff that's a little bit woo-woo or different. Examples can't help. So back in the day at Les Mills, and we talked about this, I originally was an aerobics instructor with Don Oliver's. And then Don Oliver's was bought out by Les Mills. And so all of the Don Oliver instructors got to go to Les Mills and we had to audition. And then,
Really?
Yeah, really. And then
Studio One.
Yeah, exactly. Studio
Casting
One.
couch at Les Mills.
The nightmares. And so
out.
Philip Mills and Jacqui Mills would literally sit there and go, yeah, we'll take you.
Yeah.
Rest of you over there. And so
Wow.
this is another one of those random things. Like I didn't really care where I went. And I was never one of those people that went, oh, Les Mills, that's like the pinnacle. I need to go and work there. It didn't even enter my head. But I was one of the ones that was like, oh, yeah, we'll take you.
You made it through.
That's random. And so I sit back and go, that's really weird. Because I look at all the other aerobics instructors around there, and that's where I go square peg, round hole, right? It's kind of like, I fitted, but I didn't fit. But for me, it was never about being able to say I worked there. It was never about being able to be the best instructor with the best body or the best hideous leotard. It was more about... For me, it was every time I would go up to teach a class, I would know and be able to see the people that had to haul their ass through that gym who didn't feel like they belonged, who were carrying extra weight, who hadn't exercised before, were feeling really uncomfortable. For me, it was about those people. And it was about, it was about making them feel like they belonged and keeping an eye on them, focusing on them, giving them alternatives and having them want to come back and actually make progress around fitness in their body and their self-image, right? So that was how I found my zone there. Then same thing happened. It was like, you'd be good over here. I had these pivot points in my career. And so one of them was I started, kind of going off on a tangent.
That's cool.
But I left school and went to secretarial college.
Great. Who doesn't need to be able to do shorthand quickly?
Hey, I can
It's a great skill.
I can touch type and freak people out because I can type whilst looking at them, which is like my party trick.
Yeah.
So cool.
Yeah.
Makes blogging really fast.
Wow.
But anyway, I digress. But after that, I went and did a secretarial job for a year, and I thought, I can't even find how to use my superpowers apart from touch typing there. And so then I thought, I'm going to do one of two things. So art was my big thing when I went to school. I applied for Elam School of Art at the same time as I applied to be a flight attendant.
Ooh.
Yeah, random, left and right sides of the coin.
Exactly.
And I thought, whichever one comes back, that's the one I'm going to go for.
Yeah.
And I got accepted into flying. And so I didn't even wait to see what came through from the Elam.
Yeah.
I'm just like, I can go fly around the world at 21.
Did anything ever come back in the mail?
I don't know. I didn't even look.
How old were you then?
I think I was about 21, 22.
I can just imagine, so unless you were living already on your own at that point, but I'd imagine
No, I wasn't.
Coming back to your parents, ringing you from Fiji, you got in, honey.
That was so funny because I didn't expect to get in because, again, just like at the time they were recruiting for crew, you had to go and get weighed. You had to...
There were some really strict requirements, weren't there?
There were some draconian rules of the
There
New
were
Zealand
way
Code.
draconian rules.
No sleeve tattoos like you can now.
No.
Yeah.
So you had
was
to...
that back in the day when you could smoke on aircraft?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, far out.
That was fun. So the most junior person...
Light up
me,
as you walk on board. You know?
You're assigned... back of economy, smoking zone.
Oh, the smoking zone.
Like literally, I swear, I used to go to doctors sometimes and they go, do you smoke? I'm like, nope. It's like, you sure you don't smoke? Nope. Like literally. It was pretty much from one row.
Yeah.
So what were you going to the doctors and going, hello, just here for my physical.
Yeah.
But anyway, we went off on a tangent. But with flight attending, again, it was square peg, round hole. Looked at all the other flight attendants around me and thought, well, I don't fit that stereotypical mold.
But once again, you found
I found my groove.
your groove there, right? Yeah.
So...
But you were welcomed and had a good long career there,
Oh,
right?
yeah, totally.
They loved you, obviously.
And it was,
And you love traveling, right?
So that was traveling.
Yeah.
But even in that role, the thing that I would find and gravitate towards is I'd be the person that always go and get when there was something horrible that had happened. So, for example, I was telling Rob that one of my most... I travelled all around the world, did some amazing things. One of my most not exciting, I guess, impactful moments was when a woman walked on the aircraft with her husband and they'd literally just lost their son, had committed suicide overseas, and they just had to come out to the airport and jump on a plane. And everyone was really awkward. You know, it's kind of like, okay,
Because
what can
everyone
you do?
knew.
There's nothing.
Staff were awkward.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like we want to help them, but what do you do? But I'm
Yeah.
always really comfortable in that situation. So
Right.
of course they go and drag me out. And I just literally, the husband had shut down, and I literally took the woman up, sat on the jump seat up the front with her, sat with her for 2 hours of the flight and just let her do whatever she wanted to do.
You
Listened to her, talked when it felt like the right time to talk, just sat alongside her in her pain. So I guess if I had to say what my superpower was, it's the ability to connect with people deeply, authenticity,
yeah.
empathy.
That word came up a lot when you were telling me that story. Empathy.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And the ability to help people on a journey, especially around the uncomfortable emotional stuff.
Yeah. It's like you cut through all the, I don't know what you call it, the constraints in that situation where, because I'm sure there's a rule book on what you should and shouldn't do, like an Air New Zealand guide on training, but sometimes you just got to be human and connect and throw that out and go, hang on, what's the best thing to do in this scenario?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So that's where I'm comfortable.
Here's a life hack for anyone who doesn't know this, but there is such a thing called the healing power of listening.
Yep.
And the life hack is you don't have to have any answers. You don't have to be a trained counselor or know what to say.
Yep.
You just shut up.
Yep.
Really shut up. Yeah. And I think when people are really doing that, they're connecting anyway. And they're really listening. Yeah.
It's a different level of listening. So in coaching, we use it. Listening is the key thing that we do, but we listen on way different levels than what you would normally listen.
Of course.
Yeah.
And so when I'm working with coaches and mentoring coaches, everyone gets so up in their head. And so they think listening is one thing, but people struggle to listen really deeply. And so the way I explain it to them is like, you know that scene at the beginning of The Matrix where you've got all the coding coming down, all of the green coding, and it's just everywhere, right? When coaches start, they're looking at the coding as like the content that people come up with.
Right.
Say to someone, what do you want to talk about? And out comes everything. And they're trying to watch everything as it comes out. But you've just got to, when you listen deeply, you just find this place in silence, and you're okay to let all that green stuff float away and trust that the word matrix that comes out at the end of it, whatever the word is, whatever the thing is you need to see, it's going to come out because you're listening at an intuitive level.
You got it. Yeah. You're listening on a deeper level.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're right. We get too caught up with the logic and what the words are rather than the deeper meaning and that wisdom that is there.
Yeah.
Yeah. But a great analogy. That's a beautiful analogy.
Talk about synchronistic. I was driving in the car earlier today before the episode, and I think this thing came up on the radio, which is so right. And someone quoted, if you listen to someone long enough, they'll show you who they really are. That's so appropriate, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so true.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is, and I guess on my journey over the last few years, I've had lots of ahas around vulnerability, around that armor piece. I can use my superpower. I use my superpower to hide. Because people would say to me,
brilliant.
Yeah.
People would come up to me and say, how are you doing? And I could have all the stuff going on in the background, like significant stuff. I'd be able to go, really good.
Yeah.
And then ask them a question, and then I wouldn't have to say another word. Like, it was a really good way
So you turned to
to
180?
build my armor. Yeah, completely.
You're a
So
master.
I didn't want to go there.
Yeah, no way.
You're a master deflector.
Yeah,
deflecting.
Totally.
Well,
Yeah,
that's the
it's really
problem
good
with
at
being that's the problem with being an old soul, isn't it? You can really buy into your own bullshit as much as you like.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
So
talk
that
about
was
these.
one of my ahas.
You talk about these aha moments
Yep.
along the way as almost like connecting the dots. I always say you connect the dots backwards. You can look at where you've come.
Yeah,
You can't
totally.
necessarily look at the dots ahead, otherwise they come organically and naturally. But was there one major significant aha realization moment, or were they a collection?
A collection.
Collection, okay.
A collection dropping down in depth. So the more I surrendered and the less I played hide and seek,
Yeah.
the deeper they got till I got to the one that was behind them all. But there were like all of these synchronicities and dropping points and people that came across my path that kind of layered some of their
created
ahas
your
and
story.
knowledge. Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of how it started. So the way I got into the conversation that you guys talk about in terms of moving through life as spiritual beings in the physical world, right? And being co-creators with the universe. The way that I got into that was I came across a book by Dr. Amy Johnson, who's a psychologist, and the book was called Being Human, Essays, as in essays like you write at school, Essays on Thoughtmares, Bouncing Back, and Our True Nature. And I read that book, and that just started to shift foundations.
Wow.
Rob,
and that was the start.
Rob, when you listen back to this, make sure you put that in the show notes, mate.
I'm going to read it. I think I'm going to read that book.
Honestly, it was interesting. It was just a layering, right? So I read it and I thought, okay, I kind of get how this stuff works. And she talks a lot about looking at how children move through the world.
Right.
And so there was one essay or story that she uses really simple examples that I read. And so just to give context, this had come after a time that my mother had had a horrific battle with cancer and passed away. I didn't cry at her funeral. I was the one that had to...
Do you remember what year that was?
I think about 4 years ago.
Yeah. Just a year after my father passed away.
Oh, right.
It's an interesting experience.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
So
cancer, it's awful.
Yeah, and she had a really bad battle. But God, I learned so much just even around my own programming, given how she moved through that.
Yeah.
So I've had to dissolve a lot of stuff. But yeah, so I read this book and didn't cry at my mother's funeral. I read this particular thing that she wrote and I just started crying. I'm like, pull yourself together, girl. Who does that?
Opened.
Floodgates.
Yeah.
Because also at the time, my husband was recovering from cancer and like there was a whole bunch of stuff going on. And then I realized this is the way that the world works. And actually, it's not particularly healthy to push down pain just so you can
You suppressed all of that.
through.
You suppressed feeling. And
I was a master at it.
Yeah. I think...
I knew you would be.
I was good.
You strike me as someone that would excel at anything you choose to.
Yeah, sometimes not the good stuff.
So
that's life learnings, huh?
So why do we do that? Why do we suppress the natural inclination to tune into what is real at that moment and show emotion, to show being human, to show being vulnerable and open, right? Because I have this analogy, like there's this inner child, if you like, that needs nurturing and taking care of, and at some point during in life, you've got to grow up and you lose that child, that relationship, and so you've got to be adult and you've got to be responsible. But there's always an inner child, a creative child. In some ways, your playful, true essence that's always there, that just needs love and attention. And it's almost like you've locked that child in a room and it needs just to be heard. With
padded walls.
Yeah, and you're not listening to what. But that's your truth. That's like what you were saying before about being more like a child and being more spontaneous and being more. So yeah, it's just, why do we do that as human beings? I just find that, is it because we're afraid of being hurt or being rejected? Is it because at some point in growing up we got traumatized and then, we're just going to close off. I don't want to go down that path again.
I know what it was for me.
Yeah.
And I reckon it's probably different for everyone based on kind of everyone's wisdom has their own fingerprints all over it, right?
Wow, I like that analogy.
For me, it was... So if I look at how my mum moved through her 4 years of cancer battle, she didn't complain once. She was focused the whole time on how to get Dad through it, even in so much as clearing out the wardrobe so he didn't have to do it, getting a duvet that he didn't have to struggle with changing. She didn't have any conversations with me around death or that kind of thing. Like, she was so stoic, and she'd always been that way. And I remember, I think I shared with you, I remember once back in the day when I broke up with a boyfriend, I was really upset. And I said to Mum, God rest her soul and love her to bits, but I said to her, I think I need to go and talk to someone. This is really upsetting me. I was in a horrific place. And her response, and Dad's response was, don't be so ridiculous. Just harden up. Just deal with it, right? So there was a bunch of programming for me around that stuff, which is really interesting because my whole job and part of my superpower is allowing people to be vulnerable with me. And then I think that had come from conditioning as a kid.
Yeah.
And then my husband or ex-husband, within the first year of marriage, he was a fireman, and there was a fire out in Glen Eden where some kids had thrown down some sparklers down a video return chute.
Sorry,
As you do, back in the day when there were videos.
when you had that's right, you could return
Back
after
in
hours
time.
those video and
Yep, return them or sparklers, one of the two.
Or set the place on fire.
or double
One of the
happies.
three.
Remember the
Yeah,
double
yeah,
happies?
yeah.
Throw a pack down there.
Yeah,
You know?
lots of options. So, and I tell this story because this, I think, is where it started for me in terms of just playing into a role. I remember sitting at home watching TV. He was on night shift. There's only 4 guys on a truck. And I'm watching the 10:30 news highlights, and it comes up that there'd been a backdraft at this fire shop, that there were 2 firemen significantly burnt, that they were en route to hospital, and I'm sitting there going, 50-50 chance. That's probably him, might not be. So I'm kind of like, and remember, I'm reasonably young then, so it's like, what do? I guess I'll ring up the hospital. They said on the telly that he's gone to. So I rang up the hospital. They were like, no, he's not that one. He's been taken. It is him. He's been taken to this burns unit. Got myself up to the hospital.
Yeah.
And then ensued this period of, I think he was in hospital for 2 months and then had a year off work. So I took time off work. And
So it was bad, clearly.
it was bad. And so the way for me to get through that was just to not deal with it, do what I needed to do to get him through it. And I think that just between my programming as a child, and these are just reference points for me now because I've worked through that clearly. But that was the role that I took, the one who had to be strong, the one who had to get people through stuff.
Yeah.
So that for me is, I think, where it started to develop. And then it became this pattern of resilience is good.
Yeah. And then you reinforced it
Yeah, totally. In every situation.
in every situation.
So, through mum's cancer, through his cancer. So it's interesting when you look back and have to answer that question for yourself. So resilience is great. But
Coping mechanisms
totally.
in some way, aren't they?
Yeah. But overplayed, there's always a shadow side to that stuff. And the shadow side to resilience is stoicness. Too much stoicness pretty much means you can't be vulnerable.
I'm not clear. I may have lost it a bit because amazing story, by the way, Jacqui.
Yeah.
So what's your superpower?
My superpower?
Well, it was a combination of things, wasn't it?
Yeah. Authenticity.
Yeah.
Intuition.
Yeah.
Empathy.
Yeah. And the ability to help people through transition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do I have another one? Am I missing one?
No.
Okay.
No, but if we can add any,
And I-
we'll pin
You're
them to
looking
you.
for the cape, right?
But
Yeah.
yeah. Well, you should have seen the way
Great.
she flew up here.
You're looking for
Yeah, that was my driving, not the
Yeah.
cape, to be fair.
So let's talk about what you're doing for people now with the midlife crisis retreats and that kind of thing.
So
I mean, have I said it right? Are they retreats?
no, so at the moment, I use the Stanford life design stuff to do workshops for people.
Okay.
Is
which
this
is about-
one-on-one stuff?
Group coaching.
Group
so
coaching, right.
small groups,
Yeah.
up to
Right.
10. And
Sorry, I must have got confused with Rob telling me stories about how you had attended retreats as part of
Yeah.
the things
Yeah,
that
you've gone
yeah,
and done.
totally.
I'd love to,
So I've been up
just
to
further down the track. I
Yeah.
want to really hear about Mexico.
Yeah, that was really impactful.
And some shaman stuff as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So Mexico
Yeah.
was impactful. That was midlife wisdom school.
Yeah.
But I am going to move. So what we talked about is one of the things I am going to do and move into is retreats, not for people in midlife crisis. So there's this whole thing that I have
Well, that's
about
obviously
midlife and a rhetoric, but
specialised.
for people,
Yeah.
I'm going to get them. So I'd like to get people at their transition points where they're feeling that angst, where they're feeling discombobulated, where they're wanting meaning in their life,
Yeah.
and actually work with them to give them the tools, to give them the space, to get them out in nature.
Yeah. To reconnect.
do what they have to
connect
do.
to themselves, right?
Yep,
Yeah.
because most people at that point don't know themselves. They
Yeah.
don't know what their superpower is. They're looking for something to get them before they hit the crisis point. Because I think midlife has a real branding issue.
Yeah, we were discussing this before we came on air. This term midlife crisis seems very archaic. Just the general, like it conjures up this, the stereotypical thing, right?
Yeah. So if you were to look at the societal narrative around midlife,
Yeah.
the term was coined probably 54 years ago.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yep. And I guess the way society and the programming and the false reality of that works is that we move through life, we stumble into midlife,
Yeah.
we have a crisis, and then it's downhill towards decrepitude and death,
Yeah.
right? And so that's not healthy or helpful.
Yeah.
And the Midlife Wisdom School was started by someone called Chip, such an American name, right? Chip Conley. He's, to give some context, he is a hospitality disruptor. So he's 57.
Yeah.
He started in his 20s just getting really disruptive within the hotel industry in San Francisco, made a massive name for himself. He became the strategic advisor for Airbnb. He's written a bunch of New York Times best-selling books, Emotional Equations, Peak Performance. And the latest one that kind of came across my path when I needed it was Wisdom at Work, The Making of a Modern Elder. And so he started off, so he's challenging how we look at midlife.
Yeah.
And started off as a social enterprise, his Midlife Wisdom School up in Mexico, with the view of making it available for other people who want to start social enterprises around moving people through midlife. So if you think in the 20th century, 2 phases were identified by a psychologist called Stanley Hall, and they weren't even there before, and they were adolescence and retirement. We never had those. So he identified those in the 20th century. Now, this whole midlife rhetoric's been around for a while, but no one's actually ever spent any time, I guess, challenging it.
Yeah, and giving it a new perspective.
Yeah,
and
totally.
Yep.
So how would you define it if you can do such a thing?
So there's this really cool, so what Chip did when he started to do this work around how do we, as we move through life, get away from this whole midlife crisis thing and actually start to help people understand what happens at midlife, why it happens, and how they can move through it better. He caught up with a couple of gerontologist friends, and Barbara Waxman.
Sorry, explain that.
Well, gerontologist sounds like someone that looks after geriatrics.
Yeah, kind of. They
older folk.
Yeah, they do a whole lot of research into the older demographic and what happens.
Would older
there.
like what sort of age? I know age is just you're only as old as you.
Especially after
Rob,
40.
define it for us.
No, but obviously we use numbers for age. So is there
age is a relative term, and it's
relative
a
term?
sliding
Yes,
scale.
exactly. Yeah. Are we talking 40 plus or 50 or 60 or?
So, what age do you want me to say? What age would work for you?
I don't know. Did they determine a specific age?
Use your superpower. You decide.
Just for context.
So for context, it can happen. This whole midlife thing can happen from your 30s. So if we think now,
well, if you die at 60, that's definitely correct.
which you used to in the olden days,
Yeah,
right?
true,
So
true.
longevity's increased in the last 100 years.
Yeah, and it's obviously
30 years,
everyone is unique and different, have different life paths and history, etc. It's not black and white.
Yeah.
But
So she identified the stage called middle essence, which I love because it takes
Middle essence.
middle essence. It's
Yeah,
like
I like that.
adolescence, right?
Yeah, middle essence.
So at midlife, no one's coined a term other than midlife crisis before. So she's written this book called The 100-Year Life, in which she talks about this phase called middle essence, which is essentially midlife, and that can happen. She terms it, I think, from 40, but it can jump in there at any time, right? And so it's defined as a time in life where you're looking for more meaning and when you're going through emotional, spiritual, and physical changes.
Yeah.
Hormonal as well, right?
Yeah.
As you get older too.
There's this almost, when I was going through a transitional phase, it was this almost like this, it was always this low level of sort of something is changing and emerging that I needed to address.
Yeah.
And that the old outdated ways of living were outdated. I needed to change. I needed to go on that path. But it was kind of not, weren't these specific sort of triggers. It was like as Brené Brown says, an unraveling, and you start, and it's a scary, it can be a very scary place because you're questioning things, and it's like the pendulum swinging towards another phase in life.
Yeah. It's huge.
It's huge, and you can feel discombobulated. All the things that you thought, things that worked before no longer work, right, for you. And you're going, holy shit, this is, things are unraveling. Things are,
Perfect way to sum it up.
Jacqui, can I get your thoughts on this? I'm just going to read it out.
Sure.
It's from a website called Very Well Mind, to give it credit if it was worth crediting. They write on this section of the website about midlife crisis and about what the signs of midlife crisis are. They write this. Not everyone experiences a midlife crisis. In fact, studies show a midlife crisis isn't an issue for people in many parts of the world. In fact, some researchers believe the notion of the midlife crisis is a social construct. And it's the belief that you're supposed to have some sort of crisis in your 40s that leads some people to say that they experience a breakdown. A national survey of midlife in the United States conducted a poll to determine how many people experienced midlife crises. Approximately 26% of the participants reported having a midlife crisis. Most of the participants reported that their midlife crisis occurred before age 40 or after 50. However, that raises the question about whether these crises were truly related to midlife, since midlife is typically considered age 45. Out of the 1 in 4 people who said they had a midlife crisis, the vast majority say it was brought on by a major event rather than age. And factors that triggered the crisis include life changes such as divorce, job loss, loss of a loved one, or relocation. Bullshit?
I was just looking at your reaction there, and
What do you think? Does it just simplify things too much, do you think? Or is it fair in part?
So, a couple of things for me stick out. How you described it is exactly how it happened for me. And I don't think people talk about it. So I think I think it's individual for everyone.
Yeah.
I think it's on a sliding scale that can happen anywhere between 35 and 55. Yeah. And even you could argue that could go either way.
Because we're all in different stages of life in terms of what we've and how we view life and what's important, whether we're married and whether we own a home, all these indicators of where we should be in life, right?
Yeah.
Through societal conditioning, okay? And so if you use that as a parameter, and then maybe you've reached marriage and you've got a wonderful home life, and then divorce comes up, that can be a crisis, right? It's like, oh shit, my life is going to change now.
And that can happen at any age.
Yeah, and that can happen at any age, yeah.
I think it's interesting in that it highlights the ages around sort of 40, 50. But that's probably just the moment at which a lot of people will have a dramatic realization of their own programming.
Yeah, I think so, definitely. And I think a dramatic realization of your own program can lead to a bunch of those things you just
So some people
about.
have that earlier. I remember seeing some people when I was younger, and it was particularly my female friends and acquaintances at a certain age. It was a huge motivator to want to get married. So much of the identity and the programming that was put into them by their parents and grandparents, and I was lucky not to have these kinds of ideas for myself or the male equivalent, was the importance of getting married and hitching with the right person. And it seemed to me that, and I have one particular person in mind, that the idea of a wedding was more important than who she wedded. And talk about a phenomenal example of programming there.
Yeah.
So then for that kind of person to have a divorce and then totally be, literally divorced from the identity of being a married person is going to begin a midlife crisis, because you realize that life was more about just achieving that status or that bank account figure or the whatever.
Yeah, the world comes crashing down.
Yeah.
Yep.
Completely.
Yeah.
And there's a U-curve of happiness study. So a group of social scientists over the last 30 to 40 years globally did work around, if you look at the scale of happiness or contentment with people across their lifespan, what does that look like? And it actually works in terms, it looks like, if you were to look at the graph and bring it up, it would look like a U-curve. So we start off life
just everything goes downhill for a long time, and then it gets better closer to death.
Yes,
is
totally.
That right? Okay.
No, but I'm going to articulate it.
Articulate
nicely
that. It seems pretty.
You just made it sound really depressing, but there's an upside. It ends on the upside.
Sure.
So in your 20s and 30s, your contentment starts to drop. Yeah, it does. Yeah. It starts.
As you start realizing that your life is unraveling and your dreams of marrying that man. It's just
exactly.
Yeah, but wait, there's more.
Yeah.
And then as you hit around, as it shows on the curve, around the 45 mark, and it can start earlier, it bottoms out.
Can't get any worse now.
Can't get any worse now. But it's really interesting, and this is where I think the midlife conversation is really important for people to have, because they don't talk about it. right?
Yeah.
And I think men don't talk. I think men don't talk about it, and I think men struggle with it a lot more for that reason.
Take Rob, for instance. He can't talk about his feelings at all. Me, I'm just a closed book. Yeah, a lot of us, we're just useless.
But it's true. What people end up doing is just, I'll just work harder. I'll just distract myself. I'll just keep busy and repress.
Yeah.
Don't worry. Cover it over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what got Chip interested in this kind of work is actually, so if you look at the stats in the US in terms of suicide stats within that age group,
Right.
they've increased by 50% over the last 20 years.
Sorry, the 45 age group.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
God.
Are you serious?
so-
By 50%?
Yeah, that's the stat that he cites in one of his TED Talks. And so
Well, that
he's-
means it could have just gone from 1 to 1.5.
Yeah, exactly right. So it's all relative based on the numbers.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
But what started, I guess, the rhetoric and the conversation with him and his friends, and what started the Midlife Wisdom School, is that people don't have the tools and the skills to move through the transitions on their own when they start to feel the way that you were feeling and the way that I felt.
Yeah.
They kind of don't know where to go with it unless they're people that know, they're very self-aware and they know how to go deep and work through that themselves.
Right.
A lot of people don't, and they're not having the conversations, and we don't have things in place really to help people through how that manifests.
Yeah. See, a lot of people will jump for the quick fix solution like modern society.
Yep.
But yeah, you're right. If you're not self-aware, if you're not on that path of personal development and growth and assessing and going, how can I navigate this and taking the time to do it. If you're not used to that thing, what do? Like, you feel like you
Spiral down.
You go into a negative state. You're
just not equipped with the tools.
You're not equipped with the tools.
Not.
Yeah.
Because it's not what you were given. You were given a set of tools to achieve in a certain kind of way. And in a way, this takes me back to earlier. You talked about, we laughed about someone being a career guidance counselor, giving you the idea of what you should be at the age of 16, 17, 18, as though you'd even know yourself.
Right.
Well, in this Western society, as though you'd even know yourself, right? When was the last 16-year-old you ever saw sitting down meditating for years on end and with 500 of their other schoolmates? No, it's the exception, not the rule, right?
Yeah.
So as if you'd know yourself, or as if, was the case with me, you were even able to discover yourself because you were with just so many young people competing, trying to be something that wasn't even themselves. And in an area where you're put into boxes and places and you're assessed and put in front of a career guidance counselor to say, this is what you should do. I mean, I remember being told, you're nothing if you didn't get a university degree.
Exactly.
Well, if anything, all I got was a debt, but sure, I can be thankful for some of it. And for me, that was in the 90s, and they weren't even aware of the coming gig economy. How could that even be close to being relevant when what was just 15 or 20 years around the corner life would be so different? So even if you don't even take a woo-woo approach to this or that sort of deeper level understanding, looking back on the life you've led, if you're having a midlife crisis, is then at this point reassessing, even from a non-woo-woo, as I say, that the world is just so different. It's not even about whether you find a deeper side of yourself to go and express. You probably just can't necessarily use those secretarial skills anymore because no one expects you to be doing, fast shorthand.
Yeah.
It's a different world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Completely. And actually, funnily enough, when you were describing the 16-year-old who's competing with all their mates around the expectations that they all have, sounds to me just like a group of midlife people in the corporate world.
Oh, it's just
comparing,
a grown-up version,
just a
isn't it?
grown-up version.
They're just a little bit better at the manipulation. They're just a little bit know more which games to play.
Yeah. And I mean, this is almost, the way I look at it is you're almost being led by your ego in this whole...
Oh, totally.
When you're in that situation, rather than tapping into your infinite wisdom and creative abilities and discovering your uniqueness.
Yeah.
So much of it is just such a program that we have to unstuck and unlearn and shatter and unravel and
ask most teenagers today what they want to be when they grow up, and a high proportion
Insta
of
famous.
them just want to be famous, right?
Yeah.
That's a good set of skills right there. Be one of them. How do you do that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think to your point, in terms of the ego-driven stuff, we spend the first half of our lives in attainment mode. So we start off learning and we start off earning, and that's our attainment mode.
Sure.
And so
Yep.
a lot of that time, our primary operating system is ego.
Yep.
So it's, what job do I
Yep.
want to do? Should I be married?
Yep.
Should I not be married? Where do I want to
Yep.
live? What house do I want to have, right? So you're operating from a very different place. And then at midlife, you have this moment, I
You
think,
have this
where
revelation
you go,
that I'm not happy.
there's got to be something
There's a
more
low
to
level
this,
of
right?
despair going on.
And so people don't actually know how to shift from the ego operating system,
Yeah.
which is the place of doing, to
Yeah.
the place of being,
Being, yes.
where they start operating
Yes.
from the soul more. And
Yeah.
so for me, that's the point
Yeah.
where I want to get and work with people to help, I guess, be the conduit to help them move from that
Yeah.
place of doing to that place of being.
Well, that's remarkable, because my next question was going to be, how do you help people shift to a new phase of life in their careers?
I think one of the primary things that people need to do first to help themselves shift is they've got to be prepared to evolve.
Yeah.
And to be prepared to do that, they've got to just press pause and take a real close look at themselves and who they are at that particular point in time. Then you have to help them understand and do almost a midlife edit. So what's the stuff and the baggage that they're carrying around that they have to get rid of to be able to move through the next half of their life in the way that they want to? And you have to get them to connect to the essence of who they are, because if they can't do that, then it's going to be really hard for them to move from that place of doing to that place of being.
Because you need a bottom line, a reality check of where you're at right now, and be completely truthful and authentic.
Yep. What's not serving you?
Yeah.
What's the knowledge that you've been carrying to this point that you don't need anymore? What's the baggage you've been carrying? What are your self-limiting beliefs? Who am I? What's the true essence of you?
Yeah.
That's the first step.
And getting to the root cause of why you're feeling the way you're feeling.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it might, like a crisis might happen. You might get a divorce or you'll lose your job. But under that, there's actually, that's just almost like a symptom of an unhappiness, but there's a root cause. Like you might not feel good enough, or you might have some trauma to unravel and heal. Like it's a real healing process, isn't it?
Yeah.
So like you go through
I think so.
an inward journey of healing.
Yeah.
And then getting to know who you really are. And then from there, you can start emanating that out into the world.
Can you share some, with the people that you've worked with, can you share common as well as interesting midlife crisis examples? Don't mention names.
No, that's okay. And I try to work with them before they get to that point. And so the reason that I focus on the career piece is because that's generally where it will start to manifest.
Right.
In essence. And common themes that come through, well, a lot of the time, you can start a conversation with someone. They can bring something to the table like feeling really unhappy in my career.
Yeah.
Where you end up is there could be a really deep self-limiting belief there. So there's always something, an insight that they come to that they had no idea about. And so if you can get to the place where you can go, these are the things, like really clearly articulate the things that are stopping you, like the baggage that you've got, the dysfunctional beliefs that you're holding, and let go of those things, then you can create some big change and move through life really differently. And so when we were in Mexico, one of the exercises that we did, which was really powerful, and it was about unpacking all that stuff that doesn't serve us, and the midlife edit was there was a table of about 100 stickers, and every self-limiting belief that you could think of was on there. And if it wasn't there, you could write it yourself. So all the things like imposter syndrome, I don't want to be single for the rest of my life, I don't think this workshop is going to work, I don't have enough qualifications. Every random self-depreciating thought or piece of baggage that you could carry was on those stickers.
Wow.
And so we all had to go and pick 4.
Just 4.
Yeah.
I've got 15 on there. I need more stickers.
Just 4.
Just 4. Yeah. I only need 1. Yeah.
If you are a high achiever, you could go up to 6. So you went and picked them, and then you stood in a line facing each other. So there were 19 of us in my cohort. And so part of this exercise is about there's then ritual involved into how you let go of that stuff. And so when you're standing face to face with someone, and we had probably a minute where we could stand face to face with someone, read the stickers that they had on. We couldn't speak, but if we saw that they had a sticker on that was the same as ours, we could kind of point to it and we could use eye contact and face. But when you're standing in front of someone who you've spent time being really deeply vulnerable with, and you completely rate the person that they are, and this amazing, hard-hitting, high-powered, incredible people that you're sharing the space with, when you can look at them and they've got a sticker on the same as you, and it might be something like self-belief or imposter syndrome or self-worth, and you can look at them and go, seriously? You think that about you? Do you not see yourself?
Yeah.
And they're looking at you thinking the same thing?
Wow.
That's a wake-up moment. That's where you go, oh man, I see what's playing out here. And then they ding a bell and you move along and the next person's in front of you. But that was supremely powerful. They ding a bell.
It's like speed dating.
I was just going to say speed dating.
Hey,
but in a really dysfunctional way.
You're really cute. Did you know that? Can I write that down?
And
you've got
welcome to
awesome hang-ups.
Welcome to Speed Crisis.
Speed crisis. But hey, so
Didn't
you could
really look at it that way. But
so you could not say anything, or you were not. Yeah, you were just purely.
Eye contact, reading, acknowledging.
Well, see, again,
acknowledging.
And man, it was
it's
powerful.
It's back to the healing art of listening, isn't it?
Yeah.
And like literally, and I'm quite woo-woo, but remember, I'd been guarding my heart for a long amount of time. And this place, you had to be really vulnerable.
I was just going to say, it's almost like you're standing there naked to your...
Well, that's a whole nother speed dating thing.
Yeah. well, I don't know what you're... I don't know. No, listen, I don't know what your images you were conjuring up. It was using that as a...
Methinks you protest too much. No, I hear you. Metaphorically.
Metaphorically. You are literally.
Yeah. Bearing your soul.
Yeah, totally. And so you're looking at these people and they're tearing up and you're tearing up.
I was going to ask you if they people broke down and like...
Oh, it's so powerful.
Yeah.
Really powerful.
Yeah.
And so then later on that day, so that's the part of, back to your question, how do you help people? It's helping people see the stuff that doesn't serve them and doesn't limit them, and they need to dump before they figure out how they're going to do some really cool shit in life.
Would you call this stuff your shadow self, or is it just not quite?
Not quite.
Not quite, yeah. Doesn't feel right, does it?
No, not quite shadow stuff, but
you are bringing
programming.
Yeah, bringing that into the light. You're bringing those aspects into the light. Yeah.
And so so the thing is, I was very clever at being able to be self-aware enough. I could write a list of my strengths and then a list of my weaknesses and then a list of my values, right? But that's just another ego ID you attach to yourself that limits you.
Oh, you were being very efficient.
Oh, so efficient.
Yeah.
So I knew I knew a lot of the stuff at a logical level.
Yeah.
But the process that you get taken through there gets it in at a way deeper level.
Yeah,
like at a knowing level.
There's a hardened response to knowing it at a logical level, and you can say and bullshit to yourself, I'm facing up to this. Yeah. But you can do it and go, no, I know that I have these 10 weaknesses, you see? Yep. See, look at me, I've shown my weaknesses, and you haven't actually connected to it. You can say it, but divorce yourself from feeling it.
Yeah, and defend them, be defensive about it.
Yeah. So that's the first part of how you work with people around that stuff. And coaching is a really good enabler for that, because it brings people to a place of vertical learning and insight. Yeah. And so as a coach, so the definition of coaching is International Coach Federation, if I can remember it, is partnering with clients in a creative process that inspires them to maximize their professional and personal potential.
Wow.
So you're not there to tell anyone anything. You are there to be an expert in the process, and a process that's based around psychology principles to take them through a conversation that will get them to a place of insight, because you can see things. Like, it's really interesting when you're sitting there with someone and you're deeply listening, you can pick up on stuff. And we all think we're self-aware, right? But we have blind spots no matter how self-aware we think we are. And so someone can say something that's deeply painful and laugh at the same time.
Yeah. Right? That's not me.
That's the human experience. So that's the beauty of it. I love that,
it up.
that the human species can find something dualistically but the painful and light at the same time. I love that.
But the power of that is sometimes when you reflect back to someone that they've just shared with you something that's deeply painful and laughed, and then you ask them to kind of notice what's going on for them when that happens. people go a bit deeper around
like
that stuff.
it's like a defense mechanism that just
It's interesting sometimes to just see what bubbles up to the surface.
Yeah, there's this great technique in acting called the play against, where when as a person reveals the sad truth verbally about an event that took place, that as they reveal it, they laugh, not hysterically, but kind of laugh about. Then this happened, and
Right.
but what they're sharing is great pain.
Yeah.
And the old theatre maxim was, we cry as we see people laugh, and we laugh as we see people cry. And that's the play against. When you reveal that truth, the play against the truth to maintain your status and your composure is to laugh rather than to cry openly,
Yeah. Which kind of
which
stops
we connect
them,
with and go, oh, they're really in pain, they're struggling.
Yeah.
So then it hurts us to hear it because we know they're in pain.
Yeah. And that's the other thing I love about coaching is you don't get in the muddy water with people. Like, you're the expert in the process, they're the expert in the content. And actually, the content, so all the coding and the matrix analogy, all the content that trickles out, there's just some key points that you get to. And you get to that through the different levels of listening.
Just explain, you don't get in the muddy water, so you don't...
They don't take on their shit, right?
Yeah, and actually,
Is there like a boundary that you set, or...
It's just the muddy water's not relevant. So you're there to help them see clearly.
Okay, I get it. Yeah.
You're there to almost do ninja cuts and help them cut through to see the clarity around some of the stuff that they're saying, because sometimes them just speaking it is what they need to do to get the thinking out. And then when you cut through it and reflect it back to them with real clarity and then ask like a catalytic question around it, it just takes them to a whole different place with it.
Right.
And so quite often when new coaches train, they'll get really uncomfortable if someone, say from the corporate world, comes to them with all this drama around, I don't know, a restructure that they're trying to do, or all this detail, all this industry-specific detail. They'll get worried about being able to coach them because they're not familiar with the detail. But the less familiar you are with the detail, the better, because it's actually not about the detail. It's actually about the clarity of what comes out of it.
Well, there's a huge difference to being a coach or a counselor versus a consultant.
Yeah.
You're not there to consult their business, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
And in fact, nice, Steve.
Hey,
Good segue,
I just say the good stuff.
You do.
say the
You
good
come
stuff.
up with some...
Actually, when we teach coaching, that's exactly what we go into the specific things that coaching isn't. And those are some of the things it isn't.
Yeah.
It's not consulting. It's not counseling. It's not training.
Yeah.
It's not teaching. Because you work on the premise that everyone that's coming to you is 100% whole.
Yeah.
They have the answers. I'm not there to give them the answers.
So what about people who have the answers or know themselves but struggle with the change? Because I think you can talk well to that given what you've previously confessed to up until this point. And so far as when we know that we're in a crisis and we know that, how can I articulate this, that you're not being yourself and that you need to make a change, why do people struggle with that? How do you help people who genuinely could say, look, I know all this, I'm just not doing it?
They don't really know it.
Oh, really?
Yep. If they say that, they don't really know it. And that's where coaching's really powerful, because you'll be able to spot that in a conversation. They'll be able to talk to it. So it's really easy to see either a value misalignment or a self-limiting belief within the conversation as it plays out. Mm-hmm. And so what you'll pick up in a coaching conversation often in those instances is they'll talk a lot about, yep, I know that, but then they'll maybe in the first part of the conversation or in different parts give examples of how they're acting counterintuitively to that knowing. So you can kind of present that back to them and they start to see the juxtaposition a little bit. Coaching works if two people come willing to be in the process. So if someone comes to you for coaching and they're not willing to change, they're not going to get there no matter what you do.
Yeah, because you bring up a good point. I mean, you've got to be open and willing and ready.
Yeah.
And that's, yeah.
Yeah, so people won't generally come to coaches.
Sure.
Unless they are ready. And then, sometimes you have to challenge them around stuff that you see and put it back in a challenging way.
Yeah.
But I think that change piece is really interesting, right? And that's where I want to evolve beyond the coaching piece, is that to evolve, you have to be prepared to change. To change, you have to be prepared to come well outside of your comfort zone and swim in uncertainty and uncomfortableness. And to be able to do that, you have to be prepared to face your fear. And that's the block that most people have.
Yeah.
So they move through this world thinking that their thinking is their reality. And
I love
that. Yeah. Thinking that your thinking is your reality.
Yeah. So they think they have a problem with reality when they really actually have a problem with their thinking.
Yeah.
And I know this because I did. But when you understand that you're only ever feeling what you're thinking and that there's a whole different place that you can operate from, and my experience over the last year has taught me this, you actually start to not be afraid of fear. Because the fear piece for me when I carried it was around trying to at all costs avoid pain.
Yeah, which is only natural, right?
Well, it's how we're psychologically in our head wired to work.
Yeah.
It's how our brains work, right? So our brains work counterintuitive to our true self and our true essence.
Can
because
you elaborate?
And it's a survival mechanism in some level, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Can you elaborate on a type of pain you might wish to avoid, a person may wish to reconsider?
As in?
Well, I can give you an example.
Okay.
You're in a job that pays well and you're unhappy there, but the pain of, you deal with the pain even though you're so miserable, right? Until
Who would do that? Really? Surely not. People don't do that.
Yeah, hear me out. And then you come to this threshold where you go, fuck it, I'm so over this. What am I doing with my life?
I'm so glad we mark this podcast as explicit. Fuck it.
Yeah, but you do, because it's self-frustration. You're fighting this battle and you're going, hang on a minute. And so you reach this threshold where the pain of staying in the job is now too much.
Yep.
So the pen, that's it. Or you know what I'm saying, right?
I do.
Yeah,
I know.
I know what you're saying.
It could be a relationship, or it could be anything, or it could be how you're treating yourself and with your internal self-destructive things, and you have this going, not
and so
anymore.
the problem with that is then you get to a point where you just hit an absolute limit.
Yeah.
And you just go, fuck it, right?
Yeah.
Or you
get angry enough and frustrated enough.
Or you go, oh, what the hell? And of course, that isn't necessarily a well-informed moment. Oh, what the hell?
No, you should never make a decision with a lack of clarity, being in turmoil.
Yeah. So it may be that moment of that cathartic moment of change, but I think inevitably what we're saying is it's better to have owned up to those things before the what the hell moment.
Yeah. But I'm sure some people reach that point where they just get derailed.
So I'm going to go big on this one based on my own experience.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I'm ready to go big.
So this is about the pain?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I know for me, because I've gone through multiple changes, as we move through life, we have an ego, right? And we do that because if you kind of think about how life really worked without all this construct that we have in our head of who we are and our age and our marital status and our job and whatever it is that your ego construct is, life would be a scary place. So our brains are wired to give ourselves a narrative and a story and an ego that we move through life with and an ID. You start messing around with that stuff, you have to dissolve parts of your ego.
Yeah.
And so that's, I think, where the pain comes from, because you go, this is me, this is
you've defined who you are,
but it's not
and now
who you
have to dissolve that aspect of yourself and go, holy shit.
It's your ego construct.
Yeah.
And then you have to go, well, maybe that's not me, but if that's not me, what is really me?
This is very much being the witness, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And so it's really interesting. The book that I told you about, the Amy Johnson book, I read it. It was so impactful. I emailed her. So she's a really smart woman in the States and really well known. She's been on Oprah.com, Dr. Oz, a bunch of stuff. But I thought that book was so impactful to me that I felt like I just had to email her. And whether she read it or not didn't matter.
Yeah.
And just say, whatever I just read, I know is going to fundamentally change the way I move through life and change my understanding of my reality and how I move through life. And I know you know it, but it's great work. And thank you, because you've made a real impact on me. So, and you think someone of that caliber, they don't even need to know. She emailed me back. And so I've done a lot of work on her podcasts in terms of listening to them and
Sure.
used it a lot to work through my journey. And when my marriage broke up, I emailed her and said, okay, so I know all the stuff about thinking, and I know what's going on with my thinking, and I know that it's not my reality, but are there any podcasts that you can pull me to that are just going to help me kind of work through the next phase? And she came back and she said, you know what, go and listen to the podcast around what happens when life doesn't go to plan, because all the rest of it is just, like, thinking's just the content, right?
Yeah.
And so a marriage separation or leaving a job or deconstructing all of that, the thinking's just the content. And she said there'll be a grieving process around the separation, but the rest of the stuff that's just is happening in terms of your thinking is just you recalibrating the story that you have told yourself for the last 28 odd years.
I like that.
And that was really powerful. So it's I think we avoid going near big changes because we mistakenly think that the ego and I deconstruct we have in our head is us and it's not us.
Yeah.
And so to start playing around with some of that stuff can be quite painful. And so people avoid it.
Sure.
But I really liked how she said that. You're just recalibrating how you need to move through life now. And I thought, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah.
Smart lady.
Very smart. Yeah, and it's so good that she emailed you back.
We've had a bit of back and forth.
Yeah, that's fantastic that her work that's a reinforcement that her work is actually having a positive impact and that people are changing their lives and being impacted and inspired. I love hearing stories like that.
Yeah, and that
amazing.
she's really authentic about what she does.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I'm just one random in a group of many. But yeah. Did that...
One random in an infinite universe of possibilities.
Yeah, that.
Yeah,
that. Because I do believe that we're a fractal of the universe, and I do believe in the powers of co-creation. And man, I've had so many synchronicities open up around that stuff since I just learned to let go and surrender.
Yeah.
Have you heard George Kavasilis's work?
No.
I think I did mention.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
Shout out to George. We know you're listening.
Yeah. I mean, have you mentioned fractal of the universe? I've had some kind of epiphanous moments. Epiphanous. That's
look that one up. That's a good one.
Yeah, it's a good word, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is there one that really stands out, or that once again just the collection, synchronicity, coincidences?
Oh yeah, synchronicity, coincidences. So that book and Amy coming back to me was one of them. I got to spend some time with Simon Sinek.
That's right. Yeah.
Which I don't say as a braggy thing. It's one of those examples of when the universe.
Yeah.
So if you co-create with the universe, right, you're in this little bit of a collaborative relationship.
Yeah.
If you're in a collaborative relationship or a creative relationship in business and you don't play ball, there's a consequence, right? Someone's going to have a conversation somewhere along the line, or the universe is going to slap you around when you start ignoring some of the various obvious signals that they give you.
Yeah.
So how I ended up spending time with Simon was I was working on a project around leadership, capability, and customer. And we'd employed him to do some of the co-work with us in terms of recording some of his thoughts because they really aligned with what we were trying to achieve. And that involved going up to spend 4 hours with him in New York.
Wow.
For 4 people. I wasn't one of them. But I'd started to go on this journey of there's got to be more. I need to know what my why is. And as it happened, the HR person who was meant to go up, because I was working on the project, but there were higher up people than me who were going up to interview him, she pulled out. I was in Seattle at a Boeing airline strategy conference, and my GM said to me, you're in Seattle, you're going to be working on the project. She's pulled out. How about you go up? So this was at the time where I was going through all that angsty, lost in transition stuff, right? I'm like, wow, if that's not a signal, what is?
It's like things rearrange themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, behind the scenes. And Yep.
Totally. So I went up there, spent 4 hours with them and thought, I need to sort this shit out. I so know what my why is. I've just been playing around.
You already knew. I mean, it's nice to see Simon, but I already know, buddy.
Thanks for your time.
Thanks, mate.
I already know. But I didn't mean it to come out like that. But anyway, we digress. But yeah, he was the most amazing man. And I thought, if the universe is sending me the signal, who am I to muck around with and not actually doing what I need to do?
Yeah.
And it's kind of like you crack open the door and you step through it. And you do a bit of movement and then you chicken out, right? And so came back, knew what my why was, started moving towards it.
Mm-hmm.
So did my coaching training and some other training, went up to Stanford and did the Design Your Life accreditation, and then shut the door closed again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you wouldn't want it open for too long.
Hell no.
Things that
You
could
might
come
have
through.
to step through it yourself.
Indeed,
Yeah.
indeed.
But it's kind of like baby steps, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So were you still playing that game of hide and seek with the universe at that point?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
did the universe win?
Well, given that we're
I just
hang
wanna
on.
know.
We are expressions of the universe.
Yeah, but I
If we're
just want to know
co-creating-
just how badly it beat you up.
it beat me up
Well,
real
yeah.
good.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Brene Brown talks about it as
Yeah.
there's 3 different options that you can take when the universe kind of comes to you and says, hey, you need to start manning up and stop hiding from yourself and removing your armor and
Yeah.
removing your masks and go use the gifts that you're given, because we've got this little bit of time on Earth, right, to make an impact and to do some really cool stuff.
we
that's
pulled up a quote on that, didn't we?
Yeah.
This was from that article,
Yeah, Brene Brown.
Midlife
the Midlife Unraveling.
which I read that a couple of times and far
It's
out.
insane, huh? It's like she's been in my head.
It's like she's reading your mind.
Yeah.
And that, it just hones close to the
Yeah.
truth so well. Yeah.
All right, I'll read it, eh?
Yeah, read it out.
I'm not screwing around. All of this pretending and performing, these coping mechanisms that you've developed to protect yourself from feeling inadequate and getting hurt, has to go. Your armor is preventing you from growing into your gifts. I understand that you needed these protections when you were small. I understand that you believed your armor could help you secure all of the things you needed to feel worthy and lovable. But you're still searching, and you're more lost than ever. Time is growing short. There are unexplored adventures ahead of you. You can't live the rest of your life worried about what other people think. You were born worthy of love and belonging. Courage and daring are coursing through your veins. You were made to live and love with your whole heart. It's time to show up and be seen.
Oh, it gives me chills.
Yeah, and then
I
you have
love
a
that.
choice.
It's time to show up and be seen. We spend so much of our lives just hiding, don't we?
Yeah.
From our true selves.
Yeah, even when we know
and
our true
revealing.
selves.
Yeah.
So as she goes on through that, I recommend that blog for anyone to read. I think it's really
Yeah,
cool.
we'll put
How do people find it?
We'll put on the show notes.
yeah.
Yeah,
Definitely.
I've got the link here.
Yeah. She talks about when the universe, which is pretty much yourself, your co-creator, right? When they
Right.
come to you and speak like that, you've got a few different options in terms
Yeah.
of how you can approach it.
Yeah.
So you can courageously brave it and walk into the fire and come out the other side transformed.
Like an Anthony Robbins
Yeah.
firewalk.
Oh,
Somewhat melted, perhaps.
yeah, exactly that.
Yeah.
The Phoenix effect.
Yeah.
Yeah, crash and burn,
Rise from the
but
flames.
rise from the flame.
Yep. So you can choose that option. You can put your fingers in your ear and go la 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 la, and just carry on through life ignoring it.
Yeah.
Or you can choose the existential cage fighting option.
Ooh, I like that one.
Yeah, which was the one.
Oh,
I
yeah,
chose.
that's a bit of yours.
I'm a-
The
Bit
old
of mixed martial
Big
arts.
fan at
Yeah,
MMA.
existential
let's-
cage fighter.
Yep.
Come
Yep.
on.
That's
Yep.
you, Rob.
I'm ready.
Yeah.
Do a bit of grappling, do a
Yeah.
bit of,
Yeah, so I chose that option.
Yeah.
yeah.
I went into a little bit of a lockdown mode and said, "Bring it to the
Bring it
universe," and
on.
it bought it.
There's another little quote here from a person that we greatly admire. Did you want to read that out, Rob? That's number 2 there, life lesson number 2.
Oh, yeah. This is a great quote.
You might guess who it is at the end. After
Yeah, let's
you've heard
guess.
it.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you choose to ignore the pull of something bigger than yourself, when you are being gently shown the way, you will receive what I like to describe as multiple hits to the ankle with a scooter until the pain of doing nothing becomes greater than the pain of doing something. And that's when the real journey begins.
Until the pain of doing nothing
Yeah,
becomes
that's what we were
greater
talking
than
about
the pain
before.
of doing
I was-
something.
Yeah.
What a great quote. Where'd you get
Yeah.
that from?
Wow, I'm looking at her.
Nice one, Jacqui.
Yeah.
You wrote
that sums it
to-
up beautifully.
To Rob
Oh, yeah.
recently. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
so
yeah.
cool.
No, I remember that
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
Yeah.
I can't take credit to the scooter to the ankle because I had a friend who was having multiple hits to the ankle with a scooter as well. And when she coined it that way, I thought, yes, that's
Oh, actually,
exactly
yeah.
it. Yeah.
like literally.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
metaphorically, that's awesome because hits to the ankle aren't
Pleasant.
necessarily something that takes you out.
No.
They're like continuous reminders, and they're just bloody painful.
Yep.
But you can keep moving forward in the shitty direction you were going if you wish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you get hit in the ankle with a Harley Davidson, and then it changes again.
Then you're floored for 6 months in hospital or something.
That takes you down.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's great. I love that one. That's really
But it's
cool.
true. And
Yeah.
so that's how I chose to play the game.
Yeah.
Right.
Until every
So this
I
is
guess-
existential cage fighting,
Yeah.
right?
yeah,
I mean, that people will think, there's got to be a winner or a loser, right? That's like a pretty hard, clear-cut
everyone's a
approach.
winner.
Yeah.
That image.
Yeah, that image, yeah.
Yeah, it is. But I guess the beauty, if I think about my journey, where the real power came and the change and the transition or transformation came was when I chose to tap out, which you'll get right. Tap out,
Yep.
concede.
Yep.
Concede.
Surrender.
No
Yep.
one wants to
concede.
tap out.
Yeah, no one, yeah.
Because that feels like losing.
Yeah,
Well,
but
that's
it's
the
not.
ego talking, right?
Right.
Yep.
That's
right.
the ego
Yep.
talking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. So it's just kind of surrendering and going, okay,
Yeah.
I get it now.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, some of that change I was in control of, some of it I wasn't in control of, but
Yeah.
it all worked the way that it needed
Yeah.
to work. And I had to get to that point of the pain of doing nothing.
Outweighed.
Yeah, I had
Yeah.
to get to that point
Mm.
to kind of really get the kick-ass learning
Yeah.
that I got out of it.
Yeah.
Mm.
Like the deep learning.
Yeah. I think that's pretty much.
I wasn't going to get it
I think a
any
lot
other
of
way.
people would relate to that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because my protection mechanism was going through life avoiding pain.
Yeah.
Push it down, push it down, push it down.
Yeah.
Until the universe gave me a few side swipes and I went, I see the program that's been happening that's made me do this. I can choose to either ignore it or I can choose to get taken down at the knees by some of the changes and just
Yeah.
know that I've fallen down, I'm going to fall up and just start processing and feeling the pain and moving through it. Because that's the beauty of kind of when you understand how the human experience works, you know that pain is designed to move through you. And I think
Yeah.
the relentless pursuit of happiness does us no service.
Oh, yeah.
And trying to protect everything
Yep.
around us and our ego construct and our story to maintain happiness. Actually, one of my biggest learnings is I can now proudly call myself an equal opportunity emotive. So,
Do go on.
So, yeah. So you allow your emotions to, you can
yeah,
feel good and bad, and you can have all
Yeah.
the nuances in
Yeah.
between. Don't always have to be up.
no, and so
Yeah,
much
that's great.
so now
Yeah.
because I've kind of moved more.
And you
towards-
can blame the new cage movement,
Religion.
religion.
You really can. Do
you know what I mean
I know
about
exactly
that? Like,
may I tell
Oh,
you what I
sorry.
think I know what you mean?
Yeah,
if
you
I
know
may.
what I mean,
Just
right?
correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
But
it's
I
like
think
you two are married, just
Yeah.
an observation, speaking
Yeah.
each other's thoughts. But
we're
say what
deeply
he's gonna say.
we did a whole
deeply soul bonded actually.
podcast
Yeah.
on arranged marriage just recently, actually.
Yeah, our folks got together. No, but I think unless you're thinking something different, Rob, what I'm vibing with what you're saying, Jack, is we're all too afraid to face the dark. And so often we go about life being Mr. or Mrs. Mr. Happy. I only look at the happy.
Yeah.
Everything's fine.
Yeah.
And underneath that pain and desperation is incredible hardship and depth of unhappiness because you don't face the dark.
Yeah.
Because to
You don't allow
own
that
up to,
and
admit
process
to, or process dark stuff is weakness or failure or too
Yeah,
much.
the contrasting expression of this reality.
Yeah,
right?
because
The
you don't know
dualistic
happiness
nature.
unless you know dark. Right?
Yeah, yeah. And the thing is, this is where I get not woo woo, but I see it. The two, pain and suffering, or happiness and joy, is the same thing. Happiness and joy is the same thing. I mean, like
Sure.
darkness and light. It's the same thing. It's the two sides of the coin, right?
Right.
So it's a balanced approach. So yeah. So I know exactly.
So we were on the same.
Yeah. But I think with
stay married.
but I think there's this program out there that you've always got to be successful and always got to be happy, and there's this perpetuating, you don't embrace the other dimension.
Yeah.
and see its value and its merit and
you miss balance.
And its learning and its balance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you don't face both sides of things, the light and the dark, you never have a sense of balance, I don't think. And you can't feel grounded and centered in who you are, and you lose a lot of your power by only focusing on the good things.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think what I've learnt kind of moving through the world in a very different way, because I was thinking about it before, I don't even...
Do you move as like... Do you have an analogy or a concept of how you move through the world, like as a conscious being or as a creative being? Do you know what I mean? Like you're synergized, or you're more. I'm trying to get a picture of your process of how you move through the world, because most people are kind of on an automatic pilot program.
Yeah. So different. I don't even feel like the same person. Like I find it really hard, and you guys have talked before about stories being reference points.
Yeah.
I've got a lot of reference points. I'm not attached to them. So the way that I move through life now is I'm really conscious that in the past, when I've not been vulnerable, it's a feeling place that I drop into. So I can feel now. So as I was over the past year, letting all the emotion process and the pain and doing all that stuff, I can now feel when I start to close off. It's like an energy thing. Like I can feel openness, like spaciousness and expansiveness in this place.
Is it a physical kind of sensation,
totally.
or is it a place in the body?
Heartfelt. Yeah,
it's heartfelt. Okay.
It's a heartfelt. Yeah. It's like I can move through life now with an open heart. And when stuff starts to arc up, because nothing's ever perfect, right? I can find myself getting back into a space, and I can feel it. I can feel my heart closing, like it's an energy thing. And what I do then is I just allow myself to feel the energy and the emotion and let it release. And it's really hard to explain and to put some of this stuff into words, right? But you talked about the two sides of the coin being the same. In deep pain, I think you can find joy and vulnerability in the same space, which sounds really weird.
It does.
Sound weird?
Yeah. But I know what you mean. I think I know what you mean.
Yeah. It's like I don't know. It's hard to articulate, but I tend to not label emotions now. So I think when we label emotions, we give them a place in our head and we get caught up in our thinking. So I just feel the energy of stuff. And that's the equal opportunity emotive. I don't label it in good or bad or this or that, because then you start getting caught up in the story. So I just allow the feeling to come in and just... Yeah.
Because we assign meaning to everything, don't we? This is good, this is bad.
Yeah.
I lose my job. Okay, I'm screwed. Okay.
Equally, there are people who say, I lose my job. Fantastic.
Exactly, yeah. So it's your perception.
Got all the summer off, don't have to work till February.
Yeah.
I'm referencing me.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess that's been my biggest learning. So when you can move through life not afraid of pain and not attaching, because I think we attach stories and meaning to everything.
Yeah. So you have a different relationship to pain now, don't you?
Oh, yeah, totally. I'm not scared.
Yeah. So you've calibrated it. You have a different.
It's not even. It's really weird because it's not even in a headspace kind of way. Like I tend to drop out of. I can drop out of my thinking really easily now. So I'll start, and this is one of the exercises I did, which sounds kind of random, but if there's anyone out there listening who, when we talk about the witness to the voice, doesn't quite get it, try sitting there saying hello to yourself 3 times and see who's noticing.
Yeah.
And then...
Yeah. Hello.
Awesome.
And then start... and then see who's answering. That's even more interesting.
Yeah. Well, who's witnessing
hello?
the hello? You're talking to someone's listening.
I hear you. Yes. Are you talking to me?
Yeah, but then
there is a voice in there.
Yes, it's me. Come on in.
But then listen to that voice for a whole day. So imagine if you were to listen to that voice for a whole day and write a transcript and then take that voice out and put it into a body beside you and then sit with that person for a day and listen to everything that they say.
Yeah.
Would you trust that person to make a decision in your life? Like
Yeah.
literally, with
Literally.
the stuff that comes out. Yet because we think that our thinking is our reality, we just get so hooked up in that.
Yeah.
But we get hooked up in the stuff that's attached to our ego and that will either make us go fight or flight. Or so you can, a picture that I like to use is standing in a river, current, carrying all the thoughts through, right? So think of that little dialogue that you have all through the day that your buddy, your other self is sitting alongside that you're ignoring because they're ridiculous. Think of all those thoughts passing through and you don't give them, the current takes them away, right? They come, they go, they flow. And then you see something that feels a little bit personal. So it's not, I notice the trees, I notice the sky, nice day, going to go for a workout. It's something that you see that goes,
Triggers you.
It triggers you. And so you get your bucket and you pick it up and you hold your bucket in front of you and you stick your head in it and you look at that for the rest of the day and you lose the ability to actually release it and let it go. And you create all these stories around it and they keep swirling around in your head, where if you kind of got a feel for how that stuff works, you wouldn't even pick it up in the bucket. Because actually, objectively, if you look at all of those thoughts going through, none of them are really personal. We make them personal to fit our ego construct and our stories.
Yeah.
You remind me of our fifth day going down the street, and then you go, on the fifth day, I don't even go down there.
Yeah.
Oh,
that
go
story.
down that street.
Yeah. It's such a great analogy, though, because when you can observe yourself actually putting that bucket in the water and holding it there and then immersing yourself, you're doing that.
Yeah,
Remember,
totally.
you're doing that.
Yeah.
Right. You decided to do that at some level.
Yeah.
So you've got to almost preempt that and have the...
Yeah, and I think when you realize how ridiculous your buddy sitting next to you talking through the script that you've thought all day and night, when you can see that for what it is and take the subject out of it and have it become less personal, then you don't tend to pick the bucket up.
Yeah.
Or you empty the bucket out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
you
I
start
just-
discovering your own programming and
Yeah.
what you were thoughtlessly doing repeatedly ad infinitum without examining.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a couple of layers to it, right? So you can be the witness to your thoughts and you can go, who's there sitting, watching? Because that's part of your true essence, right?
Yeah.
And the source and the energy or whatever you want to call it. And then you can go one step deeper and go, actually, when I'm really connected to that truth and that essence, I'm not actually even witnessing. I'm just sitting there, nothing but feeling.
I'm just digesting that. Yeah.
Like beyond the witnessing.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you drop into that space where you're not even noticing the thinking,
Yeah.
you're just in the silence and it's a feeling.
Would that be considered source? Or I mean, it's hard to define, obviously.
No, it's interesting when we're up in.
Yeah,
it is hard to define.
it is hard to define.
It's
yeah.
a feeling. So for me, it's a feeling.
It's a feeling.
Yeah. When we were up in Mexico, I dropped into it. And so when we had all those stickers that we burnt in the fire and said goodbye to our baggage and didn't carry it through anymore,
Yeah.
we were asked to make another sticker that on the last day we actually wore to our last get together. And mine was based on just a feeling that I dropped into in one of the things that we were doing. So when I was with the shaman on the mountain, doesn't sound half woo-woo, does it?
Not at all.
But it was on the sticker. What I wrote was, "I'm love, connection, compassion, and I'm stepping into my power." And I don't even know where that came from. Well, I do. It just was a feeling, and those were the only words that I could find to put to the feeling.
Yeah. That's powerful.
And so
It's really
that's the
powerful.
place I drop into when I think, when you ask the question about how do you move through the world differently,
Yeah.
I know I can drop into that
Yeah.
place and I can drop out of it.
So
So
it's
I'm aware of it
So
way more.
I guess you've experienced it. You can re-tap into that.
Yeah.
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 You don't lose it. You've kind of integrated into it in some level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's so even the whole pain healing thing, I think there's a degree of thinking that we have to do around it. We have to work our way through it. We have to release it. But then at some point, what are you actually healing? Because you could argue, once you've worked through it, once you've got your learnings, once you've got your reference points, the past really just exists in our memories and thoughts, right? And that's subjective. So, and it can change on a weekly or day-by-day basis. So for me, when I got to a certain point where I'd healed and kind of had those insights and dropped into a different place, I was quite comfortable for a feeling to come up and not have to get in my head and sort it out. Because I know that I've done the work. I know that it's just a feeling, and so I just let it through and not muck around with it. So I think there's a point in healing when you can almost over try and help yourself and get even more caught up in your head. When you've done the work, the stuff's moved through, and you've just got to, like, I'm just in a place of trusting now.
I think I know what you mean, where the old stimulus reference point or memory returns to your present thinking. And where you're at, you're sort of saying, oh, I witnessed that, but I'm not going to be moved or propelled into action like I used to be by it. But
I've dealt with it.
Because you've dealt with it. So
but I'll allow it to move through.
Sure. No longer necessarily pushing you or stimulating you. But then there's that other thing where people go too far and they go, oh, it means I still haven't worked on this. Oh, I've got to go through it all again. No, just let it go.
As long as you've worked on it.
As long as you actually have.
If you've done the work and you've got the learnings, it's like, and I think you guys have used the snow globe analogy once. It's right. You shake up a snow globe.
Yeah.
And the only way to get clarity is actually to put it down. There's no instruction manual for shaking it 5 ways backwards, counterclockwise, turn it upside down, right? You continue shaking it, it's not going to settle. You put it down. If you've worked through it, if you've dealt with it, and you're confident that you have, then any bad being a relative term, feelings that come up again in terms of the pain, you're in a safe enough space to know that I've got this. I'm just going to feel it. And I'm going to let it flow through because that's how we're designed as humans.
Yeah, and you can trust that feeling when you know you've alchemized that pain.
Yeah.
You know it's moved through. You don't need to go back. Because sometimes you do get flare-ups.
Oh, totally. But if you know you've worked on it.
The ember's still there and it gets flared up and you go, oh, hang on, it's not fully
I don't have to do this anymore.
Yeah.
That's right. I don't have to react this way anymore.
Yeah. But you've got to be able to be courageous enough to feel it, but don't go in there trying to think on top of thinking that you've already done.
That's nice.
It was my learning.
If you could give your younger self any piece of wisdom or advice, what would you say to her?
We did this up in Mexico.
Oh, did you? See, I was channeling Mexico.
Yeah, we did. Yeah. And then we took it one step further and went, the advice that I'm giving my younger self is helpful and based on hindsight and learning. Yeah. But actually, if I was at 60, what advice would I be giving myself now? Because I have futurism. But the advice that I would give to my younger self is the thing that makes you feel like you don't fit in is your superpower. And it's what makes you shine. Other people see it in you. You need to see it in yourself way earlier on. Value it, own it, use it to make an impact for others.
Love it.
That was my thing.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
We'll see you next time on Reality Hub.
Sounds good.